This is An Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
I'm Doug Miller, not Gary, and we're going to get right to it. We have Charles Hugh Smith on the phone. He's the author of the blog of2minds.com. He's written a lot of books, one which I'd like to focus on today, Get a Job, Build a Real Career, Defy a Bewildering Economy, and also, if we have a little time, maybe get into some of your lessons, your philosophies on the nearly free university and emerging economy. Charles, welcome to Economy of One.
Thank you,
All
Doug.
right.
Glad to be back here.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I should say welcome back, not welcome to. So, yeah, you've been a good friend of the show. Appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Well, it's a topic that's near and dear to me, and of course important to individuals and our whole nation.
Right. Well, we've been, and I was actually the first segment before you jumped on. I didn't quite get to the teachable moment of the young lady that decided to write the essay to her boss at Yelp, and
right.
I unfortunately didn't get quite to your teachable moments on that. But I think there were some parallels to that, and also just the dynamicness of our economy and the frustration, I think, of our youth in particular in terms of how in the world do I make it today while we go through, I still consider this a no recovery, job recovery.
Right, Doug. It is an extremely challenging economy, and there's no way out of it for young people. And we can identify a couple of reasons why, and they're not secrets. I mean, a lot of people are aware of them, but they're still very profound. Mm-hmm. One of them is corporations just don't have the leeway, the slack to spend a lot of time training new employees. They want people to be up and be able to run right away, and so that creates a problem because how do you get experience? Well, you can't get hired without experience, and so I have some pointers on that. And of course, we live in a global economy, and we can disagree with certain parts of that and want to change it. But the reality is, we're competing with basically everybody else in the world, and so our game has to be we have to up our game to create value in this global economy.
Right. You point out some pointers that people can do, and I think this applies not only young people but us more mature people that have been displaced, in terms of how you can develop some of those additional skills so that you are appealing to a company. Can you go into some of those ideas that you give in the book?
Yeah. The two big ones are find an organization, generally they'd be a nonprofit or a church group, that's trying to do good stuff in your community, but they're totally understaffed and underfunded. And those kind of groups are huge opportunities for young people because they're so understaffed. They'll give a young person with very little training or just fresh out of college, they'll give them responsibility for getting a subcommittee working or getting a project done or running the newsletter. And so then you don't just get like an internship, which is often just like a dead end. You're just given scut work and there's really not much, you're not really getting a lot of benefit out of it.
Right.
But in these kinds of community groups, then you got a chance to really up your game and excel. And, of course, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but because you're working for free, people will forgive you.
Right.
And the other thing is to start your own business, and it can be really small, making stuff, selling them on Etsy, whatever your local community seems to have a need for, because once you're an entrepreneur, no matter how small, you're going to start learning problem solving. You're going to develop your social and sales skills. You're going to help the customer solve their problems instead of focusing on your own. So all those skills are really beneficial.
Well, you had gone into some of this on your essay to that young lady, and she had a dream of doing PR work, and you actually shared with her how she could do it in terms of finding small companies that don't have a budget and volunteer to do it for free. Manage their social media campaigns.
That's right, and that's an example because a lot of businesses that are started or run by older generations, they're not really savvy about social media. They might have a Facebook link or something, but they don't really keep it up and they don't promote it. They don't engage their audiences. So a young person could go in and say, look, if your sales go up by 10% after I start my campaign, then how about you sharing some of that extra earnings and profits with me? And so I'll be basically speccing this thing for free, but if it works for you, then you'll have the extra money to pay me something. And that's kind of a win-win for the business, because if it fails, what the heck? The business owner's not out anything. Mm-hmm. And then the young person would have a great chance to learn what they've learned in school or what they aspire to. And then if you did a portfolio of get 10, 12 businesses together, if you succeeded, then heck, you've got an income already. Right. And then people will be looking for you, not you looking for them. They'll be looking for you because you've proven your skills.
We, Gary and I interviewed a gentleman a while back. He had a ground radar, and he showed up at University of Michigan and said that, hey, I'll do it for free. And I'll be darned if he didn't save the company $150,000. He found something that they didn't know was down there. And spin forward about 3-4 years later, he's got, last I knew, he had about 87 employees in multiple states. Did just
it's incredible.
That. Yeah, gave away his, didn't ask to get paid right out of the gates.
That's right. And, Doug, it works also if you want to work for the government. And a lot of young people do because they feel that it's going to be a stable employment and so on. Like I know a young person who was interested in books and so on. He started volunteering at the local library, repairing books that had been damaged by patrons and so on. And then when a part-time job came up, well, guess who they turned to? Somebody they knew who'd showed up on time, who'd shown diligence, who had skills already. He got hired. So even if you want to work for the government, you got to get in there and learn the skills that agency or whatever part of the government you want to work for needs, and show your stuff.
When have we got to? I mean, every now and then, I don't know if you're aware. I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, and it's fascinating to me. Sometimes listen to the kids. I think we've gotten away from the. Do things for free. Everybody wants to get paid. Did we, as parents, kind of create that, or
Well, Doug, I would answer it this way, and I'm not saying this is the definitive answer, but we have been in an economic boom since the early '80s until the wheels fell off in 07 and 08. Right. So those decades of prosperity and more jobs and higher income and all that stuff. It did kind of jade us as a culture, I think, that people their expectations are higher than what the economy can actually generate now. And that was part of the young lady who worked at Yelp and complained about her low pay was her expectations were really out of alignment with what the economy can provide. I mean, you've got to create a lot of value for your employer or your customer to get paid a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah, and I could relate to some of your writings. I mean, when I was young, I had to have roommates. I didn't have enough money.
Right.
And I took jobs that were lower paying, working my way up, knowing that was, in fact, some of my best training when I was in college was working at Wendy's, which I knew that was not my career path. But I learned an unbelievable amount about dealing with the general public.
Yeah, and a lot of my friends say the same thing. They worked for Jack in the Box, or I worked in a snack bar in a tourist trap kind of place.
Right.
And so, you learn a huge amount. And so another factor I think might be in play here is we've gotten so used to thinking that a credential equals like a job.
Right.
And actually that's wrong on both accounts. You can issue 100,000 MBAs, and that doesn't create 100,000 jobs for those MBAs. I mean, the credential doesn't create a job. And the other thing is, no matter how good the school, or the college, you're not learning on the job skills. You're getting basic knowledge, but you're not really able to walk into a company and start doing productive work with a credential, no matter how fancy. So you've got to actually get the training and the experience to get the real skills that people want. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a different story. The credential's just no longer enough.
I learned a lot right after I graduated. I had a couple of professors I was close with. I had a finance degree, and talking to them about their real life experience after the fact, and come to find out they had none. Their real life experience was in the university only.
Yes.
So I was learning finance from guys that had never really practiced it. They really brilliant from a theoretical standpoint, but had never run a company, never been a CFO of a company, or anything like that.
Right, and you're so right. That's the problem, and not to hold it against academics, but they're basically on a 10-year track. Their whole focus has to be on meeting the needs of the academic community for them to rise in a very competitive environment. So going out and starting a business and maybe failing at a couple of businesses, that would basically kill their academic career. So, and a friend of mine he's a serial entrepreneur, and he was asked to lead a seminar at a business school in the East Coast, a very well recognized one, and he said the same thing you just said, was that the students aren't really being taught entrepreneurship. They're sort of being given free license to brainstorm, and then they don't really know how to turn that into a marketable product.
Right. So I think that's critical. Hey, we're at the bottom of the hour. Would you be able to stay over? I have a few more questions.
Oh, absolutely.
Excellent. I'd like to get into, you talk about some 8 essential skills that people need, and I'd like to cover that in the next segment if you could.
Absolutely.
Great. So you've been listening to Charles Hugh Smith, entrepreneur and author. And when we come back after the break, we're going to get into some real meat on. Not that we haven't covered meat, but 8 essential skills that you all can learn. So I'm Doug Miller. This is an Economy of One.
This is an Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
Actually, this is Doug Miller, not Gary, and we're on an interview with Charles Hugh Smith, the author of the blog of Two Minds, and also kind of focusing on his book, Get a Job, Build a Real Career, Defy a Bewildering Economy. We're going to make sure that we put your links up on our site, Charles, so people can find you real easy. I wanted to talk about some of the 8 essential skills that you mentioned, but kind of setting it up. In fact, one of our staff, I circulated some stuff, and this really was enlightening to one of our staff members. You say a worker paid $40,000 must generate $100,000 in value to justify his or her employment, and then also, if a robot costs $20,000 a year to operate, replaces the $40,000 a year person, the value of that human labor falls to $20,000. That's a tough concept for some people to get their brain around. So with that setup, let's talk about some of your 8 essential skills to keep that from happening.
Right. Excellent topic, Doug. And as we all know, automation is eating up a lot of human jobs everywhere in the world, and that includes like software replacing legal assistants and tax return people, and robots replacing welders and that kind of thing. But the sort of bright lining to all that is, as we all know, technology changes aren't just in high tech. It's not just limited to Facebook and Google and Apple. I mean, technology is everywhere, and it's changing jobs and in the military, in traditional things like policing, working for General Electric. I mean, every part of the U.S. economy is undergoing these changes, and so that creates a lot of opportunities for people that are, familiar with technology. You don't have to be an expert so much, but the future is learning to collaborate with other people and do what robots and software can't do, which is they can't solve problems that they haven't been programmed to solve. So if it's something unique or there's a dynamic situation that's always changing, then the robots and the software, they're out of it, And the other point here is, in a global economy, it turns out that America and Americans have some very specific strengths that we can build on, if we don't let them slip. And they are being creative.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't necessarily have to work in a hierarchy like a lot of other societies are very regimented, and so Americans are used to working independently. So that's one of the 8 skills I think that's I consider an essential professional skill is if you can work independently, then you're already saving your boss or your employer a lot of time and money because you don't need to be managed very
Right.
much.
Self-starter.
Yeah, that's right. And you're accountable. And a lot of young people have trouble with this. Not that they don't want to work independently, but they didn't learn in high school and college that being a professional includes things like if you're going to quit the job, you call up your employer or your boss and say, I'm sorry, this isn't working for me. I appreciate the opportunity. And yet some of my friends say people in their 20s will give them a rah-rah, oh, I really want to work on your farm, and then like day 3, the person just doesn't show up and never shows up again and doesn't even have the courtesy to call or email that the job didn't work for them. So, that kind of stuff seems really basic, but apparently we're not teaching that kind of professionalism in high school and college.
You mentioned basically overviewing, but never stop learning.
Right, and that's part of what I call the emerging economy. Like that, it's going to continue to make demands on all of us to keep up and to create value. And what I hope people listening to the show take away, if they take away anything, is that value and profit flows to scarcity. What's scarce is what people will pay extra money for. What's abundant, what everybody has, the value goes to zero. And so that's the problem with getting a credential. Now there's 40, 50, 60 million people with college degrees. And so just having a credential, unless it's a PhD in computer science, which is a very hard to get, and maybe there's 1,000 issued a year. Sure, if you're at that level, then your skills are scarce. But for the mere mortals like the rest of us, we're going to have to work at developing the skills that are scarce, and instead of the ones that everybody's got. And that boils down to professionalism and problem solving, being a lifelong learner. And I think it's also important to have some business basics. No matter what field you're in, if you learn Excel and you can deal with data and financial records, that's a plus, because that's going to come up somewhere in your career. And project management skills, because virtually all jobs are managing projects of one kind or another now. So,
it's funny you say business. I was getting ready to say the trades. Gary and I have some clients who are incredibly wealthy, never went to college. They're in the trades, and there seems to be a gap in, the plumbing and, electrical and that. But if you start your own business, you better understand how to manage projects. You better understand how to balance a checkbook.
That's right. And I'm a big fan of the trades. I mean, I myself worked my way through college as a carpenter, and then after college, I just I liked the construction industry and became a builder and hired guys, and that was my first entrepreneurial experience. And so it's nowadays a lot of people think that the ideal job is young people is $100,000 working for some social media company, but actually that's really hard to do, as the gal at Yelp found out. A lot of those jobs are $25,000, and you really have to be super competitive to get into that high range. But meanwhile, people like pipe fitters and welders at oil refineries and people that can work on bridges. I mean, a lot of construction trades are paying at much higher levels than social media.
Yeah. Well, I would argue a lot of kids are being pushed into college that maybe shouldn't be at college. Sorry for my college people that are listening, and also a dad whose kids, before they could walk, it's been discussed they're going to college. So
that's right. Yeah, and Doug, you mentioned your work in your college years. I think that what's going to work best in the emerging economy is having a 2-track education. Go ahead and go to college if you can swing it, and you're not going to get $1 million in debt. But while you're going to college, you're going to have to be having a second entire track where you're working or you're getting volunteers. It's the equivalent of job experience, or you're running your own little business. You're doing something that's a whole nother track of gaining experience that you're never going to get in college.
That's a great advice there. Let's talk about and you touched on this. Gary and I talk a lot about creative destruction, and I guess also that the concept of mobile capital that you talk about in your book. And I guess I immediately when I thought of that, I remember President Obama talking about the poor tellers who were losing their jobs because of the ATM. And I was kind of laughing. I was like, wait a minute, people had to build those, design those, maintain those. Those are probably higher paying jobs than the teller.
That's so true. And we can think of many examples where, like for me, what comes to mind is I'm not an industrial production expert, but I've tried to keep up on the technology, and so it turns out that sure, a welding robot can be trained to do the same thing, thousands of times.
Right.
But when the work starts becoming unique, in other words, there's parts that aren't just on a assembly line, then it's a human welder is actually handier and quicker, or a human welder who knows how to program the robot. And so I think that that's where the future lies, is the skills, the scarcity, the value is going to flow to humans who can work with these technologies, because they're not like perfect. In other words, it's not like an artificial intelligence in a science fiction movie. I mean, these things are really still dumb. I mean, we have to instruct them very carefully on exactly what they're going to do, and a lot of as production becomes less assembly line and more customized, then there's even a bigger role for humans in all this production. And of course, we have to think about the whole supply chain. There's a lot of jobs in the whole supply chain. It's not just how many people are on the factory floor.
Right.
It's, as you say, who's designing it, who's specing the parts, who's out there finding out what customers need in the way of changes,
I'd like to we have just a few minutes left. I'd like to pivot a little bit to education, because you did, and by the way, we're talking to Charles Hugh Smith, and you'd written a book, The Nearly Free University and the Emerging Economy. As I mentioned, I have a sophomore at Ohio State. I've got a junior in high school. We're looking at colleges for her, and tuition's up 1,000% over the last 30 years, 35, some crazy number from when I graduated. What are some creative ways that a parent and or a college kid could help themselves out that way if they feel they need that degree?
Right. Well, Doug, I think that everybody knows there's a big future, and not all education can be done online, but there's obviously a big future in online education because it's basically free to distribute it, and you don't need a giant campus with a $100 million student union building and all that stuff.
Right.
So, but we're still in the beginning stages of that. So right now, the bricks and mortar colleges have a lock on the credential, and so there are cases where there's degrees that can be earned online, but I think we go back to what skills you need and what resources are out there. And so I joke about YouTube University, but in terms of a lot of different skill sets, there's an amazing variety of tutorials on YouTube. And there's also a lot of courses available on Coursera and the Khan Academy and these sort of math science sites. And so in a way, a person going to college could get the equivalent of a minor degree, by just studying extra on their own. They wouldn't even need to stay a fifth year in college to master a whole other field. And part of when you talk about mobile capital and creative destruction, I want to make a point. What we as humans can bring to the table in an age of technology and automation is mixing and matching different skill sets and areas of knowledge. So, it's sort of like I said, with the person that knows a bit about robots and robotics and is also knows about welding, they're going to be able to mix those skills and get a much higher value than somebody that only has one skill. So if you can get together 3 different skill sets like project management, financial analysis, and then biology, well, wow, you've suddenly got 3 different fields you can draw on, and you're going to create much more value for an employer or for your own business.
Yeah, and for a dynamic economy such as we have, that's absolutely necessary. So, Charles, I have really, really enjoyed this. I appreciate the time. I wish we had more time, but we're up against a break. You've been listening to Charles Hugh Smith, entrepreneur, author. He does the blog of twominds.com and has written a lot of books. We mainly Get a Job, Build a Real Career, Defy a Bewildering Economy. Thanks so much for the time, Charles. You have a great night.
It's been my pleasure, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Doug Miller, an Economy of One, your free market voice of the U.S.
This is